I'm Leonardo and I recently started replaying Morrowind 10 years after my first playthrough, trying to follow exactly what I did then and recording the best parts, the missions that I still remember better than my high school classmates. Now that I'm halfway through the game and my hard drive is almost full, I realized it's better to ask for your feedback before it's too late. So consider this video a taste test. I'm offering a bite from a big pie of adventures and I'd like your honest opinion. Let's forget for a while about Bethesda and its new depressing direction, and let's go on a trip down memory lane with its handsome Argonian thief wizard assassin. Join me on my first trip north when I need to reach the Ashlander camp called Urshilaku before anyone even considers calling me a hero. It's like high school, all over again. I had some rough first days in Morrowind, but I felt ready to begin a new adventure and set out north full of confidence. It was a long journey with many distractions along the way, but it was when I thought I had finally reached my destination that the real trial began. Up north, the road became a narrow path between steep hills and ferocious monsters, the sign to the nearest city a pile of rocks with no settlement in sight. Plants and trees had dried up, leaving space to thorny roots and pointy rocks, and among them, various remains of strange creatures. In these desolate lands, I pressed forward, quick saving, sneaking past enemies and attacking from the shadows. Sooner or later, the cliff racers would overrun me, and I needed to reload and try again. With mysterious ruins emerging from the mountains at my side and reptiles looming above, I reached the coast and stranded the ship. I encountered a scamp, a weak daedra which would become a familiar sight in the plains of Oblivion, with no interesting loot in the shipwreck. I have to say that I was often disappointed by the randomized chests at lower levels, as you can easily find much better equipment just lying around. The adventure, however, was the best prize. I was constantly in awe of the environment and the creatures roaming in it. In the end, who needs graphic power when you already have immersion? So I moved on to more ancestral tombs, dormant ruins, and a new mysterious type, heavily guarded by impressive monsters. That was a dilapidated daedric shrine with its own population of daedra, but I would catch up with the lore many books later. At that time, my best option was to go straight to my goal, the Urshilaku camp, which was easier said than done as I ran back and forth in the sandstorm. I was expecting a town, but the Ashlanders live in harmony with nature. Their camp blended well with the environment and you can easily miss it. Not that they welcomed visitors better than the wasteland itself. Not only they were far from happy to accept the new hero, they didn't even let me use their beds, even after I showered them with gifts. Well, I handed them a few coins and leaves I found nearby to raise their disposition. I didn't have any survival skills in the wild. I had not tried alchemy yet, so I had my pockets full of treasures and junk with no means of healing myself, as I left most of my potions in my hoarding pile in Balmora. I was the embodiment of greed, and I can confirm that the mix of kleptomania, aversion to using items, and low carrying capacity can kill. It happened once or twice in every dungeon so far. I was in dire straits. I needed to do a mission in the wastelands, but I had no place to rest and deposit my stuff. The convenience of silt striders made me grow soft skin.
No, I don't think so.
Now I could have run all the way back to the nearest town, but it seemed such a waste of progress. Unlike most games, I took seriously the urgency of saving the world, not as far as avoiding side quests, mind you, but letting days pass in the calendar for no reason was where I drew the line. Or you could say it was just lazy. So I made my solemn vow not to bring the entirety of the world objects inside my house, but limiting myself to one sample only. With my bag and mind much lighter, I left to prove myself as a friend of the Ashlanders by looting their ancestral tomb. The directions seemed clear enough, but I ended up instead in a completely different place, Falasmaryon, an ancient stronghold full of zombies. That was my first proper encounter with the Styx house and their crazy cult and their corpus disease, which is central to the main story, producing the fantasy equivalent of zombies. Not because I followed the line, but because I got lost and was able to see with my own eyes how bad things were outside of the ignorant safety of the towns. I spent hours running around collecting informations in nice shops and taverns with patrolling guards nearby, and all that anticipation culminated in a random encounter with the enemy. And my poor stats helped me to see them as a threat, not as things to click on for virtual currency in a power fantasy. Quite the opposite. I explored as far as I could run and quickly reloaded again and again. Apparently, nothing happened. But my lizard heart was still pounding, not out of fear but of anticipation, ready to come back, fully prepared to meet the challenge. But that wasn't the only surprise. There were 2 more rooms on top of the fort, a magical chamber and the residence of a puzzling character living among monsters far from civilization. Mysteries that I would solve later on. The first room was a propylene chamber, an ancient teleportation device, and the second was home to a marksman master trainer, one of the NPCs that can raise skill to 100 for a price. Mechanically, that Misun Akin had his place as a master trainer with a safe place for the player to rest in the desolate land, still a more welcoming place than the Ashlander camp. Story-wise, however, he seemed a lunatic to me, even in a world as weird as Morrowind, and I fully expected a good reason for him living there or a rescue mission at some point. But he actually liked the place for monster hunting, and he had an, if not realistic, at least believable living environment. It was just the first of many weird characters that have books telling their stories with reverence and awe, legends in the making. Even if technical limitations forced the characters to stand in the same room all day, that attention to detail was what makes Morrowind so fascinating. Having finally rested, I remember my mission. I wasn't there to slay 6,000 members, yet I found a new motivation to learn more about the horrors I just witnessed. Still determined to avoid walkthroughs, I ran back and forth until I stumbled upon the ancestral tomb that was my goal. There, I found an almost peaceful oasis in the Red Desert, with waterfalls and realistic statues, better suited for the living than the dead. The nice statues were actually mummies, still carrying a weapon to stand guard for eternity. I expected them to rise up and face me, but the enemies were just the usual skeletons and ghosts, the former carrying plenty of magical arrows I could use for my strategy of sneaking and attacking from afar. So I managed to easily clear the whole place while levitating to check every corner of the cave. That wasn't really necessary though. The same care that made the devs add weapons to the dead was used in placing the good items where they can be reached by any peasants who doesn't know how to levitate. Levitating is still useful to move around faster and outsmart the boss at the end, as it has been proved that heroes who stay away from the battlefield live longer. Thus I cleaned up the Ashlander's tomb, aside from the mummies and the skulls of the ancestors that you cannot pick up. Even those skulls are popular ornament in the region. Then I hurried back to the camp to thank them for their suggesting to destroy their ancestors' ghosts and pillage their resting place. Alas, a hero does what a hero needs to defeat evil and become the richest person in Vvardenfell. And vague complicated prophecies suggested that I had plenty of work left before anyone would recognize me as the true hero, the omnipotent player behind the keyboard, so I might as well continue to hoard treasures. I was starting to feel at home in this world, though nothing could have prepared me for what I would find in the land of the Telvanni. Murder, mystery, magic, uncommon opinions, from the cages to the towers. It was the fantasy book I always wanted but never read. Instead, I lived it in first person, and I'd like to tell you that tale in the full video, with all my Morrowind memories. At the same time, I'm working on my main series called Brainy Hopping, where I analyze strategy and puzzle games in a carefully edited and thought out video. But I have to warn you, I'm not ashamed of putting together Gödel and Don't Starve, game design and waifus to spice up the serious discussion. My first video focused on Into the Breach, but it includes an overview of my method. The next episode will be on Baba Is You or Papers, Please, while future goals are Return of the Obra Dinn and Portal, as well as long retrospectives, starting from the Hitman series. But before all that, I think it would be fun to start streaming so that I can eventually share what I'm doing from live first impressions to concise final videos. The more modest short-term goal is simply to learn how Twitch works, and in order to do that, I'll begin with some of the best indie games I've played, all candidates for a review analysis. So I'll be on Twitch as Leonardo Bear, or in Italian Leonardo Bare, with a second channel with the same name for archiving the streams, links below. Any feedback or suggestion you leave in the comments is greatly appreciated, from the audio to my editing, to which games to stream and review in the future. For now, thank you for stopping by, Valete.